Mayor, because I actually don't even care who the mayor is in terms of moving this plan forward. It's just about letting whoever the leaders are, and the council's included in that they know, and these, you know, we have a pretty Republican council, probably not going to get much better anytime soon, probably going to have a Republican majority by 2016, that is pivotal if we're going to continue in San Diego to lead on climate change, that it's not partisan, that there's such a wide swath of support for really ambitious action on this issue that it doesn't matter who's in power, because they're all going to feel emboldened by talking about it, right? So I'm cautiously optimistic. I feel like this is happening. So basically, we've been on a road show. I present almost day and night. I go to, because we are initially focused on making sure the city's plan gets through the environmental review process and gets passed. We focus on the official recognized advisory boards of the city, because they have a lot of weight with the council members and with the mayor's office. So there's 52 of them. So that's a heavy lift for us in terms of getting out to all of them. We have town councils. I'm sure it's similar up here. I'm just not as familiar with your government up here. But so we have our official planning groups, and then we have town councils, and then of course you have a lot of other stakeholder organizations. And so we're just constantly building that layer of support and letting the mayor and the council know again how important it is. In fact, one stakeholder we just got were the firefighters. And they're so important because, again, they really transcend party politics. Because obviously, if this is a public safety issue and this is a public health issue, then this is, again, something that doesn't matter what party people are. People feel like if the firefighters are standing up saying, what are we doing on this, right? That's really helpful. And so that's our role as an organization, is just to keep building that base of support and going to some non-traditional stakeholders, right? People that I really haven't had a lot of interaction with, but I have to, right? This is why I'm excited to see you all here, because I think, as Bobby said, the city is kind of the flagship plan, but in my opinion, we have to act regionally, right? If we're going to transform our transportation system, it can't just be the city of San Diego. We've already shown that. The city of San Diego is a little more progressive. But it has to happen everywhere. And when we have a regional transportation agency that's in charge of transportation anyhow. So it can't, you can't really just do it city by city. We have to look at the whole region as one. And in my opinion, we have to do the same for energy, right? Mm-hmm. So as everybody knows, when you move to San Diego, right, it doesn't matter where you live, what city you live in, or if you're in the out rural, in the, unincorporated areas of the county, where do you go when you need electricity? If you want to turn on the lights in your house, who do you call? Yes. Well, who else can you call? Right, nobody. Because they have a monopoly, right? They have monopoly control over our energy system. And that's a problem, because the majority of the energy on our grid is dirty, right? We have about the state requires all the monopoly utilities to have about 30% clean energy on the grid. But we had to fight to get that. And now the governor in the state in January asked for 50% by 2030. And I know, because I lobby in Sacramento as well, the utilities are fighting that tooth and nail. Well, we can't. We can't just go to battle with them over all these, kind of incremental changes when what we're confronting is the biggest crisis ever, we've ever had to face. We had to do more systemic change, and that's why the city really felt strongly about going to 100% renewable energy. And again, why I am trying to go out to as many cities as possible, and why I want there to be a regional 100% clean energy goal. Because also I feel that gives us more power and leverage in figuring out what is the solution to not having just one corporate institution in charge of all energy for all 3+ million people in the city of San Diego. That's just not right. That's just not right. And it's not going to get us to where we need to go. So, sorry, here I asked you to sit up there, and you're like, what am I doing? So that's just a little bit of preface to kind of the history of the city's climate plan and where we're at. So I'll go through it pretty quickly. I guess you guys heard from Admiral Herring, so I know you guys all know and understand, and obviously this is a progressive group, but you guys know the threat of climate change. But in my presentation, sorry, move forward, I always use this slide because I think it's pretty astonishing and something we should feel proud of, that the iconic chart that basically put climate change on the map in terms of, oh my God, there's a problem, internationally, was done by a Scripps scientist, someone from our own backyard. This is Ralph Keeling, who started measuring carbon emissions in the air in 1960 from the Mauna Loa, I can't even say that, Mauna Loa Observatory. And as you can see, so right, because a lot of times we hear, oh, there are still some folks who don't believe in man-made climate change. Oh, but it's been snowing. We've had more snow days in Boston than we ever have. Or, there's something about variable weather conditions when it has nothing to do with that. It just has to do with the trend line, right? It's not about any particular individual weather events. And so this kind of proved that. So it kind of put, again, climate science on the map. So here we're started at about 310. But then as, our industrial revolution is just obviously skyrocketed. We're burning more and more fossil fuels worldwide. So that trend line has gone up. And then today we're at about 400 parts per million. But I think some of you might be aware there's an organization called 350.org. Where us to get to 1990 carbon emissions by 2020, which usually means for each city about 15% carbon reduction. He also, to his credit, signed an executive order that said, because, by the way, this is scientists who really helped him get there, but said that's great that you're going down to about 15% reduction by 2020, but by 2050, like the curve, you have to really do the reduction, and you can probably see that from that first chart. You need to get to a 50% reduction. No, that's wrong. An 80% reduction by 2050. Right? So you're going from 15% reduction to 80% reduction, which again means that's what I started with. You have to do things differently than we ever had before, which is really hard, and we're confronting that in the city of San Diego with new development projects, or even as we're trying to transform our streets to be more bike and pedestrian friendly and with public transit. But people, and I don't blame anybody, and it's hard to reconfigure neighborhoods so that streets are different, and that you might, maybe parking, you wouldn't have the same amount of parking as you've always had. It's challenging because we've never had to think about streets being purposed that way. But these are the kind of conversations that we're starting with in the city of San Diego. So ideally, I'm hopefully going to help work with all the different cities that are working on developing their climate plans. If they are plans that are mitigating, right, reducing the carbon footprint from the expected development and population growth in your city for the next 30 years, that's how you make the plan legally binding. So that is pretty much the hallmark of the city of San Diego's plan. And I think what separates it from most climate plans throughout not only the state, but the nation. Because a lot of big cities have really ambitious climate plans, but very few of them does the city have to do anything, right? They're more visionary documents. They're aspirational. But for the city of San Diego, we have committed, because ours is, again, mitigation for our general plan. Our general plan goes out to 2035. Our climate plan goes out to 2035. We are mitigating for all of the growth and development the city of San Diego expects to have. So we'll be reducing our carbon footprint 50% by 2035. And that's exactly why, and we'll get into some of the details, we have to do things so differently, because the delta there is huge, really big, really big. But that's why, I want to work with those of you who are working with different cities up here to identify whether, if you do have a climate plan or you don't, how do we strengthen it? How do we try to get it to be legally binding? Because what I found, another benefit of when you're in the executive office is that when any city is developing its budget, what gets funded first? Staff will present to the mayor of any city a proposed budget. And some's discretionary, right? Some's just kind of like a political football and just depends on the political agenda of that particular mayor. But what's legally required for any city gets funded first. And it always gets the most dollars. So when Todd and I saw that, we were like, oh, we definitely need to make sure that our climate plan is legally required. And the reason is to make sure that it gets resources and the staffing and the investment it needs to actually get to the 50% carbon reduction that it has. So that's really fundamental, and that's probably something as I work in different cities, I'm going to do everything I can, either through kind of a political commitment to make it legally binding and or a legal requirement, because it's, again, mitigation for the general plan.
How many more of these will we have to go where they still say draft, do you think?
Oh yeah, well, because we had a new mayor, so he had to put his own thumbprint on it. So this is the last draft. So we are in the final stages. But, a lot can happen during environmental review. Sometimes, mayors can be persuaded that things need to change, or the council can be persuaded, and that's, my organization, other environmental organizations are closely monitoring and engaged in that process, because we feel so strongly about the goals that are in that plan. But so for anybody that's working on any particular city's climate plan, making it legally binding, in my opinion, is something worth fighting for. It really makes a fundamental difference in how the city will treat that plan. and whether it gets the resources and priority that we need climate plans to get. So I just stress that point. Yes?
How do you make it legally binding?
Yeah, what are the
Well,
elements?
It's just stated in the document. This is a legally binding document. But again, if the climate plan is done as mitigation for the general plan of whatever city you're living in, it will have to be legally binding. That is state law, right? By the way, the only reason this is actually true is because some of my environmental friends have sued places such as the County of San Diego, who conveniently left that out of their climate plan, that it was legally binding, even though it was mitigation for the county's general plan, right? Because, again, I'll just, speak the truth here. Cities in the county is the same way. They do not want more documents that are legally binding because then that binds up dollars. Most staffers, they want discretionary dollars. They want to be able to, again, make their mayor happy and do what the mayor wants to do with that money. Or, and again, I don't know how every city operates, so I don't know who has all the, maybe in here, probably the mayor and the council have equal power, but whoever, the decision makers, right? They want as much of the pot of money as they can to spend what their priorities are. So because when a pot of your budget is for sure tied up by things that the city is required to do, then that doesn't enable them to promote their own personal priorities. But in my opinion, because climate change is one of the gravest threats we're confronting, it's critically important that cities make these plans legally binding so that they do, regardless of who's in power, regardless of the personal priorities of any elected official, it's still getting the resources it needs to be implemented. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. It's all about money, always, right? That's what it boils down to.
So AB 32 that you mentioned,
Yes.
by Schwarzenegger, so that just applies to the state functions, that does not impact on the city level?
Both. It impacts all.
So then, aren't cities obligated by the state law
Yeah.
to perform this?
Yes, it's a great question.
Yeah.
No, and that's the problem. So it is really binding for the state. So the state agencies are required to figure out the policies and programs that California needs to implement to get to that AB 32 15% reduction. They call it the 1990 levels of carbon emissions. So that's why we have like low carbon fuel standards. You'll see that is why the utilities have to get to 33% renewable energies. But these are state level programs, right? So what they've said to cities when they're implementing AB 32 is, do the best you can. We'd like you to get a 15% reduction. But are they legally required to do that? No. And that's the problem. And that's the reason cities haven't really prioritized getting carbon emissions down. Does that make sense? Because again, I'm telling you, when these governments, like they only want to do what they have to do. The rest is just all about politics. So the more we can remove politics from it and just make it like this is what we need to do to protect our public health and safety for the future, the more success we're going to have.
So you're saying that the legal recourse for making them legally binding, it's mainly up to the public to apply pressure to make sure that their city governments comply with that restriction or that order? Or is there any other argumentation that we can have to make a climate action plan legally binding?
Well, this was something that we confronted when Todd was the mayor. So basically, again, city staff interpreted the law as that we could have it as an aspirational goal. The 2020 and the 2035 state targets could be aspirational. We said no, not only from a policy perspective do we believe that it's critically important that the document be legally binding. So any city, any local government agency can make these targets legally binding just through a policy edict, right? Just through a vote, just through a decision. But also we believed that that legally, through legal rationale, the city's climate plan had to be legally binding because again, it was mitigating the carbon impacts of the growth and development outlined in our general plan. So this was kind of a bone of contention between the city attorney's office, the city staff, and the mayor's office. But Todd made a decision, and I believe he made the right one, from a policy perspective. Again, in order to ensure it's not a political football, it's not dependent on who's in power, it just, the city makes the decision that this is, again, like the most fundamentally important act that the city can take in terms of implementing these carbon reductions. that our plan will be legally binding.